Humanity drinks over 2.25 billion cups of coffee every day.
Our favorite place to enjoy a nice cup of joe is in a cafe.
Cafes offer a unique environment where one can get work done, meet with friends, or simply enjoy the beverage.
Cafe culture is different all over the world and has changed vastly over time. We'll explore just a handful of cafe cultures in some of the most historically significant locations in Europe.
That's some serious fuel for thought.
Right now we're strolling down St. Michael's Street towards Society Cafe, one of several new age coffee shops that's in this industrial modern style that we see all the time in the States. It also happens to be Josh's favorite local spot here on his study abroad experience. Right across the street from some of the oldest buildings in the area, in the Oxford Union Society, which we were lucky enough to look inside.
For cafes were penny universities, and that's because you would pay a penny, get a coffee, and then sit all day listening to the students and the teachers talking about their latest findings and what they were studying. One time when I was here, two philosophy professors were sitting right here, and I listened to them for 2-3 hours talking about philosophy and law. And I feel like if you came here every day, you would learn something completely different each time. The historical record tells us that in 1654, Sir Jobson, a Jewish man from Syria, built a coffee house somewhere between Edmund Hall and Queen's College Corner, and called it Queen's Lane Coffee. This building right here is the current Queen's Lane, although it was only built in 1970.
Stalin, Freud, and Hitler all walk into a cafe. This one. Actually, it's not a joke. This is Cafe Central.
Author Peter Altenberg welcomes you into this 19th century cafe in the middle of Vienna. Featuring oversized windows and a bustling crowd, this cafe has become a popular tourist spot due to its rich history. As Olivia said, important figures from all over Europe gathered in this central hub in Vienna, once one of the largest cities in the world. Our first stop in Austria, and with such a depth of history, it inspired some serious historical info dumping.
Vienna was like a political, it was a big intellectual center.
During
Would be
the
kicked out of their home
1800s,
country.
Vienna
And they went to places
had
like
a
Paris
very strong
and
cafe
Vienna
scene.
and London,
And then during World
and they
War
would hang
II,
out in the cafes.
the whole city was
we can't
bombed.
say
It was
for
like
sure
completely wiped
that they
out.
all were
so
in the
only
cafe
a
at the
few
same time, but they were
cafes
all in
survived.
Vienna at the same time and like
going
so
to all the
there's
same
only, there's only a
cafes.
few left.
And
So,
this was one of them.
The joke that you
Artists
said earlier,
and philosophers
you know,
like
Stalin,
Freud,
Hitler,
of course,
and Trotsky
even
walk
to like
into
all
a
of
cafe.
them. Like all the
Like,
cafes are like, oh,
you know,
Freud
it might
was
have
here.
happened.
I think it's really lost
just
a lot
because
of
this was like
the
an
prestige it
intellectual
once had.
center. In 1777, yeah. Friedrich II, I think. He's known as Friedrich the Great. He was the king of Prussia. And he was upset because his subjects were going to cafes and drinking coffee. And this is like dangerous if you're the king, because they're coming up with like Enlightenment ideas of questioning authority and like democracy. I know, ridiculous. He was like, they're drinking coffee instead of being proper Germans and drinking beer. So we're gonna ban coffee. But people just didn't care. So they would secretly buy coffee and then brew it in their houses. And there were these police officers whose job was to go out and find the coffee. And for a while, the Prussian police officers were given the name coffee smellers. Just all of them were coffee smellers, because they would be walking down the street and be like, I smell coffee, and bust open the doors, no coffee allowed. And then, of course, the law didn't work, and they had to overturn it because coffee is just too good, too popular.
This resulted in a shutdown of cafes.
Yeah. So there weren't any cafes in Prussia, except for basically speakeasies. But yeah, you couldn't have it openly. So much like Prohibition, where you had secret basements and stuff. But then, of course, if the coffee smellers were walking by, you had to shut it down. Friedrich the Great was very famous for being a great general, and he wanted to make sure that his subjects were tough and not just lazy coffee drinkers in the cafe thinking all day, using their brains.
I know we just went in, but what were your thoughts going into the cafe?
The interior is beautiful. You walk in and it doesn't feel like a cafe.
Yeah, we're standing in front of the Contemporary Art Museum across the street from Cafe Central, and it feels more like an interior that you might see under the foyer of that.
Unlike American cafes where you'd go in, sit down, study, have your laptop out, most of the people in here were just in big groups and just talking, more like a family meal, or more than sitting down to have coffee.
While the reason that we've come to this cafe is a lot of the historic value, its long-running tradition, it seems to have, in some ways, devolved. Devolved is probably harsh language to use there, into just a modern restaurant and cafe that does a lot of volume, and they probably see a lot of revenue daily and a lot of turnover at the tables. And so while everything on the interior and all the displays they have, all the portraits and the statues they have inside, they give you the air of what it has been, it is now something that, at least functionally, is very different than what it might have been in the 1870s.
So, with that being said, I'm sure you would find that there aren't really a lot of natives.
It does feel very touristy in there. We are in the central part of the downtown. It's really easy access from all the other sightseeing places you'd want to go. And so it makes sense that there'd be more tourists down here.
We're just a few blocks from the Schönbrunn Palace and the Maria Theresa Plaza, which were some of the more populated tourist attractions in downtown Vienna. And so being just off the main path here, it seems that if you were a local coming to this establishment, it's mainly more of a spectacle that you can speak to the tradition of it, rather than somewhere you would frequent for either coffee or food.
The coffee here was about a 5, maybe 6. But they had a lot of options, which I really liked. A lot of different things you could put in, or that could be included.
I enjoyed my experience in the cafe, but it is very odd that the reason we come here is the coffee culture that is no longer present in this cafe. And so it's something that we enjoy because they have nice little pastry offerings, and our waiters are very quick and they speak English because we're in the tourist trap section of the city. But we're no longer experiencing the sort of the Penny University vibe that we've been chasing by going to these different coffee shops.
Just a short walk away through the twisting alleys of Vienna, we found a great example of a traditional Austrian coffee house, Café Havelka. Let's go in and take a look. Cafes in Vienna invite patrons to spend hours relaxing, which is why they often offer newspapers and comfortable, luxurious furniture. While we're getting comfortable, we can forget the Italian terms we're used to and introduce the unique names of Austrian coffee: Schwarzer, Brauner, Cappucciner, Einspanner, and the local favorite, the Wiener Melange. Where does the unique Austrian cafe culture come from? Well, legend has it that after breaking the Ottoman siege of Vienna way back in 1683, the Austrians found sacks of camel food left in the Ottoman tents. But when they started burning these sacks, a Polish noble recognized the smell, gathered all he could, and opened the Blue Bottle, the first cafe in Vienna, where he pioneered mixing sugar and milk into the drink. Although this story probably isn't totally true, I think we can still appreciate Vienna's unique and comfortable cafe culture.
We begin our Parisian cafe adventure at Le Procope, Paris's oldest cafe.
Le Procope, just behind me, traces its origins all the way back to 1686. It's often said that it might be the longest continuously operating cafe in Paris, but it's a bit of a precarious claim considering that the cafe did shut down in 1872, taking around 50 years to reopen its doors. Partially owing thanks to the French Comedy Theater which opened up across the street from it, Le Procope enjoyed the frequent patronage of writers, actors, philosophers, and revolutionaries. Some of the more famous patrons to have walked through the doors include Rousseau, Voltaire, and it's speculated that Diderot's encyclopedia got its start just inside.
Le Procope is not the revolutionary coffee house it once was. It still tries to engage with its history by making itself essentially a walking museum of historical artifacts that once belonged to these historical thinkers. Our visit to Le Procope was quite enjoyable. The food was delicious, the coffee was good, but it is much more fair to say that it is a restaurant rather than a coffee house. Our next stop was Café de Fleur. The four of us really enjoyed our time at Café de Fleur. It was rather busy. Our table was in a little outside patio, so we were able to look upon the street, and the coffee and ambiance was just very unique and upscale experience. Café de Fleur was opened in 1885 and has existed as a space where writers, thinkers, philosophers, and just normal people come together to meet and enjoy a cup of coffee or to just read. One of our favorite cafe experiences was a coffee shop that we just kind of came up upon called Café Richard. We sat outside and people watched and enjoyed our coffee and just had conversation, which I think is very reminiscent of a true experience at a coffee house. And it was a bit more quaint and humble relative to the other coffee houses we had gone to. Café Richard is much more of an example of this sort of new age coffee cafe experience. Le Procope and Café de Fleur are old age European style coffee houses with sort of elaborate or very aesthetically pleasing decor, and have like notable histories as well.
winding, narrow streets of Venice open up to a grand square.
Piazza San Marco. You can see the basilica behind me and a number of cafes founded in the 1700s along either side. This is Cafe Florian, founded in 1720. Boasting marble tiles, an opulent interior, and waiters in tuxedos, it really makes us question what can still be counted as a cafe. And while it's the oldest coffee in Venice, it's also the most expensive.
We traveled to Venice with this cafe already in mind. The Florian and the port of Venice are real contributors to the emergence of coffee beans in Europe. However, it has been some time since this place has been the center for intellectual and social life in the city. Nowadays, Cafe Florian is simply telling old stories. To find the cultural experience that these famous cafes may have lost, we have to wander further. At least a little further from the sea of tourists.
So they have plenty of seats.
Cafe Rousseau. Less history than the Florian, but much more conversation and more coffee.
And then like two people had an espresso at the bar. To my right, one person to the left, and like the two people did not know each other, but were like just chatting up. I don't know what they were talking about. It was all in Italian. But then they were just like chilling at the bar, and then I was like, okay, so this is where I stand to get my espresso.
Next time you go into a cafe,
Look around
enjoy a coffee.
and embrace the culture that surrounds you.
I went to a cafe in Europe, you know what I saw. A coffee, culture, cafe. What? There was some culture. People were different. People were talking to their friends. In America, they just sit around to do their work.
All over the world. Cafes all over the world. Enjoy some coffee in a cafe, maybe with some milk. I don't know how you like coffee, but you should enjoy it in a cafe. Cafe. Coffee. Cafe. Culture.
Okay.
I recorded that.